Welcome to Sleepy Science. Tonight, we are talking about déjà vu, that strange moment when your body reacts before your mind does, when a place feels known but you cannot say why, when your brain whispers this already happened even though it did not. Déjà vu is not a mistake. It is a quiet body mystery. Your brain sends a signal too early. Your memory answers too fast. For a few seconds, time bends in a soft and confusing way. In this video, you will hear the most relaxing facts about déjà vu, not loud facts, not rushed ideas, just slow truths about why this feeling appears and why it fades. Facts that let your mind drift while your curiosity stays awake. By the end, déjà vu will feel less strange, but also more mysterious than before. If you enjoy falling asleep to quiet science and hidden brain stories, subscribe to Sleepy Science now, and let your thoughts wander as we begin. It often begins without any warning, in the middle of a normal moment that should not feel special at all. You might be standing in a room you visit every day, or walking through a place you have never noticed before, when something quietly shifts inside you. Your body reacts before your thoughts have time to catch up, and for a brief moment your attention locks onto the scene in front of you. The space feels familiar in a way that does not make sense, as if this exact situation has already played out somewhere deep inside your mind. You do not see clear memories or images from the past, yet the feeling carries a strong sense of certainty. It is not a guess and it is not imagination. It feels like recognition, even though you cannot explain what you are recognizing. You look around more carefully, hoping to find a clue that explains the feeling, but everything appears ordinary and unchanged. The sounds continue, people move as expected, and time keeps going forward as it always does, yet your mind feels slightly disconnected from the moment. There is no panic in this experience, but there is a soft unease that makes you pause. It sits quietly in your chest, creating the sense that something important just happened, even though nothing visible has changed. Your brain begins to search for answers, offering quick explanations that almost fit but never fully satisfy. Maybe you saw this place in a dream once, or maybe it reminds you of another moment that feels similar. But none of these ideas explain why the feeling feels so exact. What makes the experience unsettling is how confident it feels, as if your mind has already decided the truth before giving you any evidence. The certainty arrives first, and the explanation never follows. For a short time, you exist between two states, one where the moment feels completely new and another where it feels strangely repeated. Your senses tell you this is happening now, but another part of you insists it has already happened before. You might check the time or shift your position, hoping that a small change will break the feeling and return things to normal. Sometimes it fades quickly, leaving behind only confusion, but sometimes it stays just long enough to make you question your sense of time. The world continues as if nothing unusual occurred, yet you are left with the sense that reality briefly slipped out of alignment. Everything looked correct, but the feeling did not match, like a scene copied too perfectly to feel original. People often move past these moments without speaking about them, because they are difficult to explain and even harder to prove. Still, the experience leaves a quiet question behind, one that lingers even after the feeling disappears. Why did that moment feel known, even when there was no memory to support it? What makes this experience powerful is not how long it lasts, but how deeply it convinces you while it is happening. Your brain behaves as if it has recognized something meaningful, even though it refuses to show you what that thing is. There are no images, no stories, and no clear connections, only the sense that your mind briefly stepped ahead of itself. It feels like touching a memory that does not belong to the past you remember. Some people describe it as time folding in on itself for a second, while others say it feels like watching a scene replay without warning. No matter how it is described, the feeling remains difficult to dismiss because it feels grounded and real. Your senses stay sharp during the moment, which makes it harder to blame distraction or confusion. You see clearly, hear clearly, and understand where you are. Yet something inside insists that this moment is not entirely new. The experience ends as quietly as it begins, leaving behind only a trace of uncertainty. You return to what you were doing, but part of your mind stays focused on what just happened. That lingering feeling raises a deeper question, one that many people never think to ask. What if this sensation does not belong to the present moment at all, but comes from somewhere just outside the flow of time as we understand it? When the strange feeling appears, your brain responds before you have time to question it. The reaction is fast and automatic, happening beneath your awareness, as if a silent switch has already been flipped inside your head. Before logic has a chance to speak, another system steps forward. This system does not use words or explanations. It works with patterns and signals, deciding what feels known and what feels new in a fraction of a second. Your mind does not wait for proof when it comes to familiarity. It makes quick judgments based on speed, not detail. By the time you begin to think about what is happening, your brain has already chosen how the moment feels. This is why the experience feels so sudden. There is no build-up. 1 second the moment feels normal, and the next it carries a strange sense of recognition that seems to arrive fully formed. Inside the brain, information moves along many paths at once. Sight, sound, and space are processed separately before being joined together into one experience. Most of the time, this happens so smoothly that you never notice it. But sometimes, the timing is slightly off. Not enough to cause confusion, and not enough to feel like a mistake. Just enough to change how the moment is labeled inside your mind. A delay this small would be invisible to you. We are talking about milliseconds. Shorter than a blink. Shorter than a thought. Yet in the brain, those tiny gaps matter more than we realize. If one signal arrives just a little earlier than another, the brain may treat the moment differently. The feeling of familiarity can appear before the full picture is complete. When that happens, the mind reacts as if it has already seen this moment before. Logic comes later, much later. Logic asks questions and looks for reasons, but by then the feeling has already taken hold. That is why explanations often fail to remove the sense of knowing. Your brain trusts speed more than accuracy in these moments. Fast decisions kept humans safe long before careful thinking had time to develop. The brain still uses that system today, even when it leads to confusion. The strange part is how natural this feels while it is happening. There is no warning sign that something unusual is taking place. The mind treats the signal as real, even when it cannot explain it. This creates a quiet conflict inside you. One part of your brain insists that the moment is familiar, while another part struggles to understand why. The feeling remains strong, even as logic falls behind. It can feel like your thoughts are chasing the experience instead of leading it. You notice yourself thinking about what you are feeling, rather than feeling something you chose to think about. This order matters more than it seems. When familiarity appears before understanding, the brain assumes the feeling is correct. It does not question it right away because questioning takes time. By the time your mind tries to explain what happened, the moment has already passed. All that remains is the echo of certainty, floating without a clear source. This may explain why deja vu never comes with a clear memory attached. The brain never actually retrieved one. It simply reacted too early and labeled the moment as known. In this view, the experience is not about the past at all. It is about timing, a tiny mismatch in when signals arrive and how they are combined into awareness. The brain does this combining constantly. It stitches together the world from pieces, creating a smooth experience that feels complete. When the stitching is slightly uneven, the result can feel strange but convincing. You do not feel confused because the brain fills in the gaps. It always does. Instead of saying something went wrong, it offers the closest explanation it has: familiarity. That explanation feels solid because it comes from a deep and trusted part of the mind. The same part that helps you recognize faces, places, and voices without effort. The feeling does not ask permission to appear. It does not wait for you to agree. It simply happens, leaving you to deal with the meaning afterward. This raises a quiet question that many people never consider. What if deja vu is not a memory returning, but a moment arriving slightly out of order? What if the brain sometimes reacts to the present as if it were already processed, even when it has not been fully understood yet? The idea can feel unsettling because it suggests that our experience of reality depends on timing we cannot sense or control. Milliseconds that quietly decide how a moment feels. Most of the time, this system works perfectly, giving us a stable and reliable sense of the world. But when it slips, even briefly, the result can feel like time has played a trick. The experience fades quickly, but the question it leaves behind stays longer. If such a small delay can change how reality feels, how much of what we experience depends on timing we never notice. The brain does not offer an answer. It moves on, already focused on the next moment. But the mystery remains, waiting quietly beneath the surface of ordinary life. Memory is more complicated than it seems. Most of the time, we think of it as a simple filing system, like a library where every moment has its own shelf. But the brain does not store experiences that neatly. Instead, it works with layers, constantly sorting, tagging, and sometimes mixing things together without our notice. There are two main systems at work. Short-term memory holds details for seconds or minutes, the things you notice right now and might need soon. Long-term memory stores information for much longer, from hours to years. It is where the story of your life lives, or at least pieces of it. These two systems usually work together, passing information back and forth. But sometimes they overlap in unusual ways. Overlap is when short-term experiences are mistaken for long-term memories. A new scene might feel familiar because the brain connects it to something it saw just moments ago, not something from the distant past. Yet the sensation can be so strong that it seems like it belongs to years ago, or to another lifetime entirely. The brain has an incredible talent for tagging experiences as remembered almost instantly. A glance at a face, a sound, a smell, even a pattern of light can trigger the feeling that this has happened before. It happens faster than you can consciously process. That is why deja vu can appear so suddenly, like a spark that ignites in the mind without warning. The tagging process is not perfect. It relies on millions of connections firing at precise timings. If a signal comes too early, too late, or in a slightly wrong order, the brain may label a moment as familiar even when it is entirely new. The sensation is real, but the memory may be imaginary or misaligned. Sometimes, the brain mixes pieces of different memories together. A street corner might look like another street you saw a week ago. A conversation might feel repeated because it shares a tone with something you overheard before. Yet your mind combines these pieces in a way that convinces you it is one complete memory. Short-term memory can be particularly tricky. It is fragile, fading in seconds if not reinforced. But while it exists, it can leave a strong impression, enough to be mistaken for long-term memory. The brain's labeling system does not distinguish perfectly between fleeting impressions and solid memories. Even long-term memory is less reliable than we usually assume. Studies show that memories can be reshaped every time we recall them. Details shift, connections are added or removed, and what we remember may be only partly real. The sense of familiarity we feel in deja vu might come from this instability, from a memory that is close but not exact. Some scientists think that deja vu happens when the brain tries to match the present moment with memory fragments that are almost identical. If the match is close enough, the brain responds as if the moment has already happened, even if no perfect memory exists. That tiny error creates a strong feeling of recognition. The tagging system is so powerful that the sensation often comes without images or stories attached. You feel like you know something, but you cannot recall where it came from or what it means. Your brain acts on memory before you are aware of any memory, leaving you with only the impression of familiarity. Memory is also tied to the senses. Smells, sounds, and sights can all trigger sudden feelings of knowing. A faint scent in a room, the echo of a voice, the way light falls across a wall. These small signals can push the brain to say, "You've been here before," even when the situation is new. Because the brain sometimes mislabels new experiences as old, deja vu is not always a window into the past. It is a reflection of how memory works, a reminder that the feeling of certainty does not always mean accuracy. What seems familiar may be a trick of timing, a misfire in the memory network, or a combination of unrelated impressions that the brain interprets as one. Even though memory is imperfect, the brain trusts it deeply. That is why the sensation of deja vu feels so convincing. You cannot easily argue with it because it bypasses logic and reason, speaking directly to a part of your mind that recognizes patterns instinctively. Short-term and long-term memory systems are designed to support each other. Short-term memory captures what is happening now, then passes important details to long-term memory for future use. But the process is not instant. Signals must travel, connections must form, and timing must align. If anything happens slightly out of order, a new moment can feel like it belongs to the past. This explains why deja vu is brief and fleeting. The misalignment lasts only for a few seconds, long enough for your mind to notice something unusual, but short enough that the experience disappears almost as quickly as it appeared. Your attention moves on, the brain corrects itself, and the sense of familiarity fades. What is fascinating is how the brain can tag something as remembered without giving any evidence. You feel certainty, yet you cannot produce a memory to match it. It is a quiet mystery, one that shows how much of what we believe about memory is based on instinct rather than fact. Even in healthy brains, memory can mislead. The feeling of knowing can arise from shadows, fragments, and tiny errors in timing. Deja vu is a moment when the mind reveals this secret, showing how fragile and powerful memory can be at the same time. This suggests that what you remember may not be as solid as you think. The sense of past experience is often built from pieces, guesses, and rapid judgments that are convincing enough to feel real. Every moment you think you remember clearly might already be colored by the brain's corrections and misfires. The next time you feel deja vu, remember that your mind is not lying, but it is playing a quiet trick. It tells you that the present is the past, even when it is not. It shows how memory can surprise, mislead, and intrigue in the smallest, most mysterious ways. Even as the moment fades, the question lingers. How much of what we believe we remember is truly from the past? And how much is created in the instant by the brain's incredible ability to tag, recognize, and misfire in ways we cannot see? Sometimes deja vu feels like stepping into a scene you have never seen before, and yet it seems familiar in a way that logic cannot explain. Your mind may be showing you something imagined long ago, something you thought was only in your imagination, and yet now it feels as if it existed somewhere beyond thought. The brain has a way of borrowing its own creations and placing them into reality without warning. Moments you have imagined, played over in your mind in quiet hours, can suddenly appear as if they belong to your waking life. A street, a face, a voice, elements you once dreamed about can surface and trick your mind into believing they have already happened. These are not memories in the usual sense. They are echoes of imagination that feel like memory because the brain interprets familiarity as proof. When a scene carries elements your mind has created before, it can trigger the same sense of recognition that arises with true memories. It is as if your mind is a painter filling blank spaces in reality with colors from your imagination. You do not notice the blending, only the result, a moment that feels like it has always existed. The lines between what was imagined and what was experienced blur without warning, leaving you unsure of what is real. The effect is subtle at first. You might catch a glimpse of a place and feel a small tug of knowing. A person's expression may strike a chord of recognition. The sensation is soft but persistent, enough to make you pause and wonder why you feel certain. Your brain does not tell you it is borrowing from imagination. It simply presents the feeling of familiarity, leaving you to make sense of it afterward. That is why deja vu often comes without explanation. It feels like a memory, but it cannot be traced to any past event. Sometimes it is a location that seems imagined. You might turn a corner and see a hallway, a room, or a park that feels exactly as you pictured it in your mind before. You cannot recall when or why you imagined it, yet the recognition is immediate and compelling. Other times, it is a small detail that triggers the feeling. A pattern of light, a shadow moving across a wall, a smell that seems familiar but cannot be placed. All of these can awaken the sensation that something has already happened, even though it exists only in fragments. Dream imagery is not limited to fantasy or unusual events. Ordinary scenes, everyday objects, and casual interactions can appear first in your imagination before the brain allows you to experience them in reality. The familiarity does not mean prediction. It is the mind recycling its own ideas in unexpected ways. When imagination leaks into the waking moment, it can feel like a secret the brain has kept until now. A memory that never existed as memory, a past that never happened, arrives with the confidence of truth. That is why deja vu can feel so strange. It is not an error of the past, but a folding of imagination into perception. This blending of imagined and real experiences shows how fragile our sense of reality can be. Your mind trusts patterns, symbols, and images. When it recognizes elements it has already processed, it interprets them as evidence of familiarity. Yet these elements may have existed only in a private mental world before appearing as reality. You may feel certain you have lived the moment before, even though it was only created in your mind. That certainty is part of the brain's design. It prioritizes speed and pattern recognition over careful verification. The moment feels known because your mind treats imagined scenes like they belong to your history. Even small details can trigger the effect. The way sunlight hits a floor, the texture of a wall, or the sound of footsteps echoing in a hall, all can connect to images your mind created before. These small connections are enough to convince the brain that the moment has already occurred. This is why deja vu can feel so specific. It is not always a vague sense of recognition. Sometimes it is exact, precise, and almost disorienting. You are sure of what you see and feel, but when you search your memory for proof, you find nothing concrete. The brain's blending of imagination and reality also explains why these experiences feel fleeting. The recognition is immediate and powerful, but it fades quickly as the brain recalibrates. Reality reasserts itself, leaving only the lingering sense that something unusual just happened. That moment, however brief, is enough to make you question what is real. Did you imagine it before, or is your memory playing tricks? The line between memory and imagination becomes soft, almost invisible, as your mind presents a moment that is both known and new at the same time. Sometimes, the effect is amplified by emotion. A scene that carries feelings, even faint ones, can feel more real because your mind associates it with previous imaginings. A warm light, a soft sound, or a fleeting smile can deepen the sense of certainty, even if you never experienced it before. Your brain does not intend to confuse you. It is working perfectly as designed, using every tool it has to make sense of the world. Familiarity is a survival mechanism, a way to recognize patterns quickly. When imagination matches perception closely enough, the system signals recognition, whether the memory is real or imagined. This is why the experience is so mysterious. It feels like the mind is showing you a secret it has kept hidden. A place you have never visited feels familiar because your own imagination built it first. A moment appears already known because your brain recycled it before reality allowed it to happen. The result is a quiet fascination. You are left questioning how much of your experience is based on true memory and how much comes from the mind's creations. The world around you feels more layered, more complex, and strangely intertwined with the unseen workings of your own thoughts. The experience fades as suddenly as it arrives, leaving the mind in a subtle state of wonder. For a moment, you stood in a reality that was partly imagined and partly real, and your brain treated both as the same. The line between memory and imagination is not fixed. It moves, shifts, and sometimes reveals itself only in fleeting moments of deja vu. Even after the feeling passes, the mind holds onto the question. How much of what seems familiar is real, and how much is a reflection of your imagination quietly shaping the present? Every day, the mind looks for patterns. It notices shapes, sounds, faces, and movements, even when we are not paying attention. The brain is constantly predicting what will happen next, and most of the time, it is right. That is why you rarely feel completely surprised in ordinary life. These predictions are so automatic that you do not notice them. You walk down a street, and your brain anticipates the layout of buildings, the movement of people, even the way light will fall on the pavement. You hear voices, and your mind guesses the rhythm of conversation before words are fully spoken. Sometimes these predictions are almost perfect. The world unfolds exactly as expected, and you feel a quiet satisfaction, a sense that everything is as it should be. But occasionally, the prediction arrives slightly too soon, or your mind notices the pattern more clearly than usual. That is when the sense of familiarity can appear. A place may feel known, even if you have never been there. Your mind recognizes the shapes, the spacing, and the way objects are arranged. It reads the scene as if it has already happened, because it fits the brain's prediction of how the world should look. Faces can trigger the same sensation. You see a stranger, yet there is something in the expression, the posture, or the movement that your brain matches with previous experiences. The recognition is fast and silent, leaving you with the strange impression that you have met this person before. Conversations can feel familiar too. Perhaps a line of dialogue, a turn of phrase, or a small gesture strikes a chord deep inside you. It is as if you have already lived this exchange, even though it is unfolding for the first time. The brain predicts language patterns so quickly that you feel recognition before conscious thought arrives. These patterns are not always exact repeats. They can be echoes, fragments, or similarities to moments experienced long ago. Your mind connects the dots automatically, creating a sense of memory even when nothing is identical. It is the brain's way of making life manageable, spotting repetition to save energy and attention. When predictions are strong, the feeling of déjà vu can be intense. The mind reacts as if a memory has been triggered, even though it is not recalling a specific event from the past. It is reacting to expectation, not history. This is why déjà vu often appears in places that seem ordinary. Your brain already knows what to expect there, even if you cannot consciously articulate it. The layout, the objects, and the interactions all fit a model built from previous experiences, giving a sense of familiarity that feels real. Sometimes the brain even predicts the sequence of actions. A person reaches for a cup, and your mind already imagines it before it happens. A conversation unfolds, and your thoughts anticipate the next sentence. The prediction can be so accurate that when the event occurs, it feels like a memory, a moment repeated from somewhere in the past. The effect can be more pronounced when the mind is tired or distracted. When attention is divided, the brain leans heavily on predictions. It fills in details before perception catches up, and the sensation of familiarity grows stronger. You are left wondering why the moment feels so known, even though it is happening for the first time. Patterns in life extend beyond places and people. Everyday actions, routines, and interactions also create expectations. The way the morning sunlight falls across a table, the rhythm of footsteps on stairs, or the tone of a colleague's voice can all trigger recognition. When these patterns align with your predictions, the brain treats them as memories. Even subtle similarities can be enough. A combination of smells, sounds, and visual cues can create a moment that feels like a repeat, even if you have never experienced it before. The mind interprets these small coincidences as proof of familiarity, feeding the sense of déjà vu. It is not always the past that causes the feeling. The brain's ability to predict can make the present feel like it belongs to something already lived. In this sense, déjà vu is less about recalling a memory and more about the mind anticipating what is happening before it truly unfolds. This idea challenges how we understand our experience. We often assume familiarity must come from memory, but it can also come from expectation. The brain treats accurate predictions as if they were confirmed memories, blending anticipation and perception into one seamless feeling. Even when the experience is brief, it is convincing. The mind feels certainty, as if proof exists, even though it is reacting to its own pattern recognition. That is why déjà vu can leave you unsettled and amazed at the same time. The brain's predictions are rarely wrong, which is why they feel real. Most of the time, the system works without notice, guiding your movements, understanding, and reactions. But when you suddenly become aware of these predictions, the sense of recognition becomes startling, even mysterious. Moments of déjà vu show the brain's quiet power to anticipate and react to the world. They reveal that your sense of the past can sometimes be created entirely in the present, built from the mind's own expectation of how events will unfold. Even when the feeling disappears, the question remains: was that familiarity from memory, or was it created by the brain's anticipation? The distinction is subtle, and the mind offers no immediate answer. The line between past and present blurs, leaving only the quiet sense that something unusual just happened. Life is full of patterns, and the mind is always ready to recognize them. Every step, glance, and word can become part of this system, feeding the brain's predictions. Sometimes, these predictions are so accurate that the present feels like the past, and the fleeting mystery of déjà vu appears without warning. In the end, the experience shows that our sense of time, memory, and expectation is more complex than we realize. The brain works behind the scenes, quietly predicting, anticipating, and interpreting, and occasionally it surprises us by creating the strange, almost magical feeling that we have been somewhere or done something before, even when we have not. The feeling of déjà vu is more than just a trick of the mind. It is a window into how the brain processes the world, how it stores experiences, and how it sometimes misfires in ways we cannot see. Scientists have studied this mysterious sensation for decades, trying to understand why it happens and why it feels so real. At the center of the brain's memory system is the hippocampus. It is a small, curved structure tucked deep inside, responsible for forming new memories and connecting them to what we already know. Alongside it, the temporal lobe helps recognize places, faces, and events. Together, these areas manage how we perceive time, familiarity, and continuity. When déjà vu occurs, these regions are working perfectly and unusually at the same time. Electrical signals travel through neurons, carrying information about what you see, hear, and feel. Most of the time, the timing is exact, allowing the brain to match the present moment with past experiences smoothly. But sometimes, signals misfire, even briefly, creating a tiny gap or overlap in processing. These misfires are invisible to consciousness. You do not feel a glitch, but your brain reacts as if something has already occurred. That is why déjà vu often comes unexpectedly. It is not a memory recalled, but a subtle signal that your brain's timing system is off by milliseconds. That tiny misalignment is enough to convince you that a new moment has already happened. Interestingly, déjà vu is very common in healthy brains. Almost everyone experiences it at some point, though some feel it more often than others. Researchers believe it is a natural side effect of how memory and perception are organized. The brain constantly checks patterns, compares new experiences with stored information, and makes quick judgments. Occasionally, these comparisons occur slightly too early, creating the illusion of familiarity. The sensation is brief because the misfire corrects itself almost instantly. Your brain realizes, without conscious effort, that the moment is new. The feeling of certainty fades as your mind recalibrates, leaving only a trace of wonder behind. The short duration is part of what makes déjà vu so compelling. It feels powerful while it lasts, yet vanishes before you can analyze it completely. Even in healthy brains, these tiny glitches reveal how delicate the system really is. The hippocampus and temporal lobe manage enormous amounts of information every second, from sights and sounds to emotions and spatial awareness. A minor timing error can create an experience that feels both real and impossible. It is a reminder that perception and memory are not perfect recordings of reality. Some studies suggest that déjà vu occurs when the brain accidentally treats new information as a familiar memory. The temporal lobe signals recognition too quickly, before the hippocampus has fully processed the event. This split-second confusion produces the intense feeling that a moment is being repeated, even when nothing has been stored previously. The experience can be slightly disorienting because it bypasses conscious reasoning. Your mind reacts with certainty, but you cannot explain why. Logic arrives too late, and by the time it does, the feeling has already passed. That is why déjà vu can leave you curious, unsettled, and fascinated all at once. Electrical misfires in the brain are not harmful. They happen all the time in small ways, unnoticed and harmless. The mind is built to tolerate minor glitches, using them to adapt quickly to new information. Déjà vu is just one visible sign of these hidden processes, a rare moment when a glitch becomes noticeable. The mystery deepens when considering how much the brain hides from awareness. Most of the signals and processes that create perception never reach conscious thought. We experience life through a filtered version of reality, with only a tiny fraction of activity entering awareness. Déjà vu is a rare glimpse behind that curtain, showing how the mind quietly checks, compares, and sometimes mislabels moments. Even after the sensation fades, the mind holds a subtle memory of uncertainty. You know the moment felt familiar, yet you cannot recall why. This lingering question demonstrates how the brain manages thousands of tiny events simultaneously, and how only a few glitches rise to conscious notice. It is also remarkable that déjà vu occurs in completely healthy brains. The same misfires that create this strange sense of repetition could, in other situations, contribute to more serious memory problems. Yet the brain handles them effortlessly most of the time, showing its resilience and precision. The hippocampus, temporal lobe, and surrounding structures form a complex network that constantly interprets the present in the context of the past. When one small piece of that network sends a signal a fraction too early, the brain reacts as if a memory has returned. The result is a fleeting moment of certainty, entirely convincing yet impossible to trace. Researchers continue to explore why these misfires occur, but there is no definitive answer yet. They may relate to fatigue, stress, or simple neural variability. They may also reveal deeper principles about how the mind organizes reality and memory. Whatever the cause, déjà vu remains a universal reminder that perception is not always perfect. The phenomenon leaves an undeniable impression. Even as your attention moves on, your mind recalls the sensation itself. You remember how familiar the moment felt, how strange it was, and how quickly it passed. That memory of familiarity, rather than the memory of events, is what remains, a subtle mark of the brain's silent complexity. Every instance of déjà vu is a glimpse into the hidden mechanics of the mind. It shows how the brain constantly compares, predicts, and sometimes misfires in ways that create moments of mystery. These moments reveal that the mind is not simply a recording device. It is an active, dynamic system, capable of tricks, errors, and astonishing coincidences. Even when the feeling disappears completely, it leaves behind the sense that reality is layered, and that the brain is capable of quiet surprises. These surprises happen in milliseconds, unnoticed most of the time, but occasionally they rise to awareness, giving us the strange, compelling, and unforgettable experience called déjà vu. Time feels continuous, flowing evenly from one moment to the next, but the brain does not always experience it that way. The mind does not record life like a camera or measure seconds like a clock. Instead, it stitches moments together, creating the illusion of smooth movement even when the process is far from perfect. Each instant of awareness arrives in pieces. Sight, sound, touch, and emotion are processed separately, then combined to form what we perceive as one seamless moment. Most of the time, this stitching happens so perfectly that we never notice it. We believe time flows steadily, but the mind is constantly catching up, adjusting, and aligning fragments to make sense of experience. Déjà vu is a hint of how this process can shift unexpectedly. Sometimes the brain stitches moments out of order or overlaps them slightly, creating the sensation that one instant is repeating itself. A brief echo of perception appears, carrying the certainty of familiarity, even though nothing has actually occurred before. These tiny loops in the mind are almost impossible to detect in normal life. They happen in milliseconds, so fast that consciousness rarely notices. But every once in a while, a loop is large enough, or timed just right, to reach awareness. That is when déjà vu emerges, a ripple in the smooth river of time that catches your attention. The sensation is subtle but powerful. You feel the present moment as if it already existed, even though it is new. A phrase spoken by someone, a glance at a street, a shift in light across a wall, any small detail can trigger the sense that the brain has already experienced it. Time inside the mind is not always linear. Moments can fold back on themselves, echoing in tiny loops before your attention fully registers them. The hippocampus and temporal lobe, which manage memory and recognition, may send signals slightly out of sync. One part of the brain perceives now while another signals familiarity, creating the impression of a repeated experience. These echoes are not mistakes in the usual sense. They are byproducts of a brain optimized for survival and efficiency. By predicting patterns and comparing current events with stored experiences, the mind creates shortcuts for understanding the world. Occasionally, these shortcuts produce the unusual but compelling feeling of déjà vu. The brain can compress time, stretching or contracting perception, so that some events appear longer or shorter than they actually are. A few milliseconds of delay can make a moment feel like it has already happened. That is why déjà vu often appears fleeting yet intense, as if time itself has bent just enough to make the present feel familiar. Even tiny discrepancies in timing can create strong effects. Signals from vision, hearing, and touch must arrive almost simultaneously for perception to feel smooth. If one signal arrives just a fraction earlier than the others, the mind may interpret it as a memory. The present feels like the past, and the ripple is experienced as certainty rather than error. These loops do not repeat endlessly. They are brief flashes, passing quickly and quietly, leaving only the sense of familiarity behind. That is why déjà vu is difficult to explain. It is not an event stored in memory. It is a ripple of timing, a momentary misalignment in the way the brain stitches together perception. Sometimes the sensation spreads, connecting multiple senses. A sound may match a vision, or a smell may line up with a movement, amplifying the feeling that the present is somehow familiar. Each signal reinforces the illusion, creating a small but convincing wave that flows through the mind. This is why déjà vu feels real and specific. It is not vague or general. The brain is responding to tiny overlaps and echoes in multiple systems at once, producing the impression of certainty. Even though nothing has actually repeated, the mind perceives a pattern and signals recognition. The effect fades as quickly as it appears. The brain corrects the timing discrepancy, aligning perception with reality once again. The loop closes, the echo ends, and time resumes its normal, smooth flow. All that remains is the lingering sense that something unusual happened, a memory of the ripple rather than a memory of an event. Experiences of déjà vu reveal that perception is built on a delicate balance of timing and integration. The mind-stitching process is usually flawless, yet even a small shift can create moments that feel like repeats. These moments show that the sensation of time is more flexible than we imagine. Even though we cannot slow or control these loops, we can sense them indirectly through the feeling of familiarity. The brain's invisible machinery creates a seamless experience, hiding the tiny errors that generate mystery. Déjà vu is one of the few moments when these hidden processes rise to consciousness. The mind constantly anticipates, corrects, and aligns, but occasionally it leaves a trace, a small gap between perception and recognition. This gap is what we experience as déjà vu, a fleeting ripple that challenges our understanding of reality and time. In a way, every moment carries the potential for déjà vu. The brain is always testing patterns, stitching fragments together, and adjusting timing. Most of these adjustments are invisible, but occasionally they appear as a brief and compelling sensation, reminding us that perception is not always linear and that the mind is far more complex than it seems. Even after the feeling disappears, the mind continues to notice. You remember that the moment felt familiar, and you wonder why it did. That memory of the ripple persists, leaving a subtle impression of the hidden workings of your own brain. The tiny echoes, the loops, and the timing misfires remind you that perception is not a simple record of time. It is an active, dynamic construction, full of mystery, constantly working, and occasionally letting you glimpse its hidden patterns. Deja vu is not just about memory or perception. There is an emotional layer, subtle but undeniable, that makes the experience feel real. It is not frightening, but it is strange, a quiet tug at your mind that you cannot ignore. The feeling is curious, soft yet compelling, like a whisper from a part of the brain that usually stays hidden. The strangeness comes from certainty without explanation. You know with a deep inner conviction that the moment has already happened, yet you cannot recall when or where. There are no images, no stories, no concrete memories, just familiarity. It is this gap that makes the experience unusual and fascinating. The brain seems to withhold the actual memory, offering only the sense that something is known. It is as if a part of your mind knows more than the rest of it. You feel the recognition, but when you reach for details, there is nothing to grasp. That is why deja vu carries an air of mystery, a small but powerful secret about how your brain works. Even though it is incomplete, the familiarity is enough to make you pause. It is not like fear, which demands attention and often drives action. Instead, it is quiet and introspective, lingering just long enough to make you wonder. You notice it, feel it, and then it disappears almost as quickly as it arrived, leaving only a memory of the sensation itself. The feeling is often subtle at first, a flicker of recognition, a tiny hesitation in thought, a sense that the world is slightly out of sync. Your body responds before your mind can catch up, signaling that something is different even though you cannot name it. The emotional layer gives weight to the experience, making it real in a way that pure perception alone could not achieve. The brain's choice to withhold details is not accidental. It may be part of the system that allows memory and perception to function efficiently. If every sensation of familiarity came with full detail, the mind could become overloaded. By offering only the feeling of recognition, the brain signals that something matters without demanding full recall. This selective presentation explains why deja vu can feel both real and mysterious. You feel certainty, but the proof is missing. The moment is vivid in emotion but empty in content. The brain provides just enough to intrigue, just enough to convince, and then leaves the rest blank. The missing details create a unique tension. You are certain yet uncertain. You know yet you do not know. That combination is unusual in everyday life, where feelings and facts usually align. In deja vu, the alignment is incomplete, leaving the mind curious and engaged. Even when you try to analyze it, the emotional layer resists explanation. You might think, where is this memory coming from? Or why does this feel so familiar? But the answers are elusive. The brain has not handed over the content, only the sensation. This deliberate withholding adds to the mystery and keeps the mind questioning. The sense of familiarity is powerful precisely because it is incomplete. It engages instinct and intuition rather than logic. Your mind trusts the feeling, even when there is no conscious evidence. That trust makes the experience compelling and slightly unsettling at the same time. It is also worth noting that the emotion of deja vu is typically neutral. It is not tied to fear, excitement, or sadness. The brain presents the recognition without the narrative, allowing the experience to exist in a kind of emotional vacuum. This makes it easier to observe quietly, as a strange curiosity rather than a pressing concern. The incomplete memory also allows for imagination to fill gaps. Because the brain does not provide the details, you might wonder about possibilities, creating your own story to explain the sensation. This adds another layer of mystery, as the brain and imagination interact without full awareness. Sometimes the emotional resonance lingers even after the feeling fades. You remember that the moment felt familiar, and that memory of familiarity can stay with you for hours or even days. It is a reminder of the hidden workings of your brain, a mark left by a fleeting misfire in timing, perception, or recognition. The experience highlights how memory, perception, and emotion are interconnected. Deja vu is not just a glitch. It is a demonstration of how the brain balances certainty, emotion, and awareness. It shows that feelings can be accurate even when details are missing, and that the mind often communicates in subtle ways rather than explicit facts. The emotional layer also explains why déjà vu captures attention. Even though nothing harmful is happening, the combination of certainty and missing information creates curiosity. Your mind wants answers, but the answers are withheld, creating a small but persistent puzzle. This is why people remember déjà vu so vividly. They do not recall it because of images or events, but because of how it felt. The sensation of recognition, the strange certainty, and the quiet tension all leave a mark that is easy to notice afterward. Even though the brain hides the details, it reveals enough to intrigue. The experience becomes a private mystery, a fleeting moment in which the mind offers a glimpse of its own hidden patterns. It is like seeing a shadow of something important without ever being allowed to touch it directly. Deja vu reminds us that perception and memory are not simple. The brain can create certainty without content, familiarity without explanation, and emotion without narrative. That combination produces a feeling that is strange, compelling, and impossible to fully explain. In the end, the missing memory is the most fascinating part. The brain gives you the feeling of knowing, but never the knowledge itself. It is a secret, quietly held, hinting at the complexity of the mind and the mysteries that lie just beneath conscious thought. The experience leaves you aware that something extraordinary has happened, even if you cannot describe what it was. It is in that absence, in the space of what is missing, that déjà vu gains its power. The brain shows the outline of something, just enough to trigger curiosity, and then remains silent. That silence becomes part of the experience, shaping how it feels, and why it is remembered long after the moment passes. Memory might not be what we think it is. Most people imagine that the mind stores the past like a photograph or a video, keeping exact copies of moments to recall later. But neuroscience suggests something different. Memory is not a perfect record. It is more like a reconstruction, built from fragments, impressions, and patterns, reassembled every time we try to remember. When you recall an event, the brain does not retrieve a complete fixed image. Instead, it pieces together sensory details, emotions, and context, creating a version of the past that feels real. Each time the memory is accessed, it can be slightly altered, adjusted, or filled in with gaps. What you remember today may not be exactly what you remembered yesterday, or even what actually happened. This idea raises fascinating questions about the nature of reality. If memory is constantly reconstructed, what does it mean for our experience of time and history? Deja vu might be one small clue, a signal that the brain does not simply store reality but edits it as it goes along. The sensation of familiarity without a memory attached hints that the mind is active, shaping experience in real time. The moment of déjà vu feels like a window into this process. You know a place or a situation feels familiar, but you cannot locate it in the past. It is as if the mind recognizes patterns before fully explaining them, or perhaps recognizes them in ways that never actually existed. This could mean that the brain is rewriting reality slightly, moment by moment, as it interprets new information. Every day, the mind makes countless choices about what is important, what to remember, and what to discard. These choices are often unconscious, invisible to awareness. When déjà vu occurs, it is a brief hint that these processes are always happening, quietly shaping perception and memory behind the scenes. Consider how perception itself is influenced by expectation. The brain constantly predicts what will happen next, filling in gaps and smoothing edges. If memory works similarly, then the past is never fixed. It is continually rewritten, updated, and reinterpreted based on new experiences and current understanding. Deja vu could be a byproduct of this system, a moment when the mind's editing becomes apparent. This raises a subtle question. How much of what we experience as the past is actually reconstructed? How often does the brain create impressions of events that feel real, but are partially or entirely generated in the act of remembering? Deja vu may be a hint that our memories are less about history and more about interpretation. The sense of certainty during deja vu is striking because it feels undeniable, yet it is based on nothing concrete. There are no images or facts attached, only the perception that the moment has occurred before. This supports the idea that the mind is not simply retrieving information, but actively generating it, filling in patterns and assigning meaning as it goes. Even the smallest details can reinforce this sense of reconstruction. A particular sound, a fragment of conversation, a fleeting visual cue, any small signal can trigger the brain's recognition system. The moment becomes familiar not because it is stored in memory, but because the mind interprets it as fitting a pattern it expects to exist. Philosophically, this suggests that our experience of the past is more fluid than we usually believe. The brain may be less a recorder and more an editor, constantly shaping, adjusting, and reinterpreting events. Deja vu could be a rare glimpse of that process in action, when the mind signals familiarity without giving a history to match. The experience challenges our sense of certainty about reality. We assume that what feels familiar has already happened. Deja vu reminds us that this assumption is not always true. It hints at the possibility that the mind actively participates in constructing reality, not merely observing it. Even the fleeting nature of deja vu supports this idea. The sensation appears suddenly and fades quickly, leaving only the sense that something is known. The brain does not provide an explanation or a memory because it is busy continuously reconstructing the surrounding world, updating perception, and revising interpretations. It is as if the mind is constantly editing a story, and we live inside that story without seeing the pen and ink at work. Deja vu is a moment when the hand of the editor becomes visible, just for an instant. The feeling of recognition without content is evidence that the mind participates in shaping reality as we experience it. This perspective opens up new ways of thinking about memory and time. The past may not be a fixed place we can visit, but a living construct that evolves with each moment. Deja vu may be a clue that the mind is actively interpreting, predicting, and reconstructing rather than simply recalling. Even after the sensation passes, the experience leaves a subtle impression. You remember the feeling of certainty, the intensity of recognition, and the quiet strangeness of it all. That memory of familiarity becomes a mark of how the brain edits perception and memory in real time. The process raises further questions about the boundaries between past and present. If memory is reconstructed, then the past is not entirely behind us. Moments exist partly in the mind's present, continually revised as they are recalled or interpreted. Deja vu may be a brief crossing point, where present reconstruction overlaps with perception, creating the eerie sense that you have lived this moment before. Even without answers, the experience feels meaningful. It hints at the complexity of the mind, its hidden processes, and the subtle ways it interprets the world. The brain's silent editing work is revealed for an instant, offering a glimpse into the invisible machinery behind every thought, every memory, and every perception. In the end, deja vu leaves us with more questions than answers. What is memory if it is always reconstructed? How real is the past if it is constantly rewritten? And how often does the mind shape reality without our conscious awareness? The phenomenon provides a small, mysterious window into these mysteries, showing that the mind is not just a recorder, but an active participant in the creation of experience. Even without conclusions, the sensation encourages curiosity. It is an invitation to wonder at the inner workings of the brain, at the hidden patterns that guide perception, memory, and understanding. Deja vu reveals a world behind the world we see, a place where moments overlap, time bends, and the mind quietly edits its own story. You may remember the first time deja vu touched you, a moment that felt strangely familiar, as if you had lived it before. At the time, it seemed impossible, unsettling, and quietly mysterious. You paused, noticing the sensation but could not place it. Nothing about it made sense, and yet it held a certainty that you could not deny. Now, after exploring the brain, memory, perception, and imagination, that same moment feels different, richer, and even more puzzling. The streets you walked, the faces you saw, the sounds that filled the air, all are layered with more meaning than you realized at first. What once seemed like a simple misfire of memory now feels like a window into something larger. You understand a little about timing, predictions, and the ways the brain recognizes patterns, yet the essence of deja vu remains elusive. It is tempting to try to explain it fully, to label it as memory error, a timing glitch, or a trick of expectation. But no single explanation captures it completely. The feeling is not a problem to be solved. It is not a puzzle with a neat answer waiting to be found. It is a momentary signal from your mind, showing that the workings of perception and memory are more complex than your conscious mind can ever fully know. As you revisit that first sensation, notice how it carries layers that were invisible at first. The small details, the way light fell, a sound echoed, a movement felt familiar, all become clues not to the past but to the hidden processes of your own mind. It is as if the brain is revealing only part of the story, keeping the rest behind a quiet curtain, letting you sense it without fully understanding. The mystery is part of the power. Deja vu is compelling not because it can be explained, but because it cannot. It offers a brief taste of knowledge that the mind holds but does not reveal, a sense that there is more happening beneath the surface of awareness. You feel certainty without evidence, familiarity without memory, and curiosity without answers. Even as you reflect, the feeling does not demand action or resolution. It is gentle, fleeting, and quietly mesmerizing. It reminds you that your perception is active, not passive, that your mind constantly edits, predicts, and interprets, often without your notice. Each instant of deja vu is a subtle message. The mind is more than it seems, quietly orchestrating reality in ways that escape conscious observation. The repetition in life, the patterns your brain recognizes, the timing of electrical signals, and the echoes of imagination, all of these layers converge in the sensation. Yet even understanding these mechanisms does not remove the mystery. The knowledge enhances the feeling, giving it depth rather than diminishing it. You sense the hidden complexity, the subtle mastery of the brain, and that awareness itself is part of the experience. Think of the sensation as a ripple across the mind, brief but vivid. It flows through perception, emotion, and intuition, touching something deep inside that is usually quiet. It leaves a memory not of events, but of certainty, of the feeling that the mind has more knowledge than it is willing to share. That memory lingers, even when the moment itself has passed. As you revisit these layers, the strange familiarity becomes almost comforting. It is not frightening, not alarming, but quietly captivating. The mind signals its own intelligence, its ability to process, predict, and recognize in ways that your conscious awareness rarely grasps. Deja vu is a reminder of that hidden competence, a subtle hint at the complexity of thought and perception. You may also notice that the sensation invites reflection. The moment holds space for wonder, for curiosity, and for quiet fascination. It is not about solving a riddle or finding certainty, but about appreciating the elegance of the mind's hidden operations. The fleeting familiarity is an invitation to observe without expectation, to notice the invisible threads that connect perception, memory, and intuition. Even when the feeling fades completely, it leaves an impression. You remember the certainty, the quiet strangeness, and the unspoken knowledge it suggested. That impression is not a memory of what happened, but a memory of how it felt to sense something beyond explanation. It is evidence that your mind holds more than it reveals, and that your awareness is only a surface layer over a much deeper process. In this way, deja vu is both ordinary and extraordinary. It occurs in everyday life, triggered by familiar patterns, timing, and sensory echoes. Yet it feels extraordinary because it reveals a hidden layer of perception, an inner structure that silently shapes experience. The ordinary world is filtered through the mind's active editing, and deja vu is one of the rare moments when the editing becomes visible, if only briefly. Even after hours, days, or years, that fleeting sensation remains memorable, not because of facts, faces, or places, but because it touched something deeper. It hinted at the complexity of the mind, the hidden timing, the silent predictions, and the unspoken knowledge that guides perception. The mystery remains unresolved, compelling, and quietly astonishing. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect is that it does not need explanation. You do not have to understand the mechanism fully to feel its impact. The moment is complete in itself. The mind signals recognition, anticipation, and hidden knowledge, and you experience it as a brush with the unseen workings of consciousness. That is the quiet beauty of deja vu. It offers insight without answers, presence without resolution, and familiarity without history. Returning to the first experience, you see it now not as an anomaly, but as a reminder. The street you walked, the glance you shared, the sound that struck a chord, these were signals, not memories. They were moments in which the mind revealed a hint of its depth, showing that reality is constructed and interpreted, that perception is active, and that consciousness is only part of the story. Deja vu closes in on itself without conclusion. It appears, touches awareness, and then fades, leaving only the sensation of certainty and mystery. There is no solution to seek, no history to trace, and no explanation that fully captures it. That is its power. The mind allows a glimpse of knowledge it holds silently and then retreats, leaving curiosity in its wake. The sensation invites reflection but resists finality. It is a moment to notice, a moment to feel, and a moment to acknowledge the hidden processes that shape life. Even if you never understand why it happens, you can appreciate what it reveals. The mind is vast, layered, and far more capable than conscious thought admits. Deja vu is the quiet announcement of that hidden intelligence. In the end, the experience returns to the same place it began, a fleeting moment of certainty, a strange familiarity, and a hint of knowledge withheld. You may never know the full story, but that is part of its charm. It is a reminder that the mind knows more than it shows, and that even ordinary moments contain layers beyond awareness. And so the feeling remains with you, a gentle, mysterious companion. It shows that life is more than it appears, that perception is active and layered, and that consciousness is only the tip of a vast, intricate system. Deja vu is not solved, not explained, but it is experienced. And in that experience, it leaves its quiet, unforgettable mark.